All right, hello everyone. Happy Sunday. My name is Dr. Scott. I'm a psychedelic integration psychologist turned jungle medicine adventurer living here in the beautiful rainforests of the Amazon, and I'm learning firsthand about the indigenous plant medicines from a culture whose wisdom dates back over 50 generations. I'm talking about the beautiful Kichwa tribe here at Sashawasi. I'm also the host of Psychedelic Sundays, where each week we'll be bringing you inspiring people and messages to help you discover how to unlock your inner greatness on this plant medicine path. So, those these days we have. I think it's pretty obvious that more and more people have been turning to psychedelic plant medicines like ayahuasca to help them heal. And as a result, people everywhere are beginning to use their addictions and their PTSD and their depression, their anxiety, and even their suffering as a positive springboard for their spiritual awakening. So I think that now is a good time, is as good as ever, to apply some of Timothy Leary's sage advice to turn on, tune in, and drop out. So for those of you who may be too young to know who Timothy Leary was, um, or maybe you've been one of those people that, that was like my parents, that wasn't a part of their culture. And Timothy Leary was one of the most iconic and controversial figures of the psychedelic movement of the 1960s and the 70s, back in my day. And he's got to be probably the most infamous proponent of the therapeutic use of and the spiritual benefits of psychedelics. And he developed this philosophy of mind expansion and personal truth through the use of psychedelics. So I mean, he's a real big thinker and had a huge impact in my life personally. And I got my first my first psychedelic experience from Timothy Leary. But he was this guy that talked about starting your own religion, and that really embodies Leary's probably his core attraction. It was all about this expansive, personal spiritual freedom. Nobody can tell me what to think. This is my choice. It's for me to become, to become my highest version of myself. I mean, you guys hear me talk about that all the time. It's from Timothy Leary. I mean, I think I say that in every integration call that I have. It's like for us to become the highest version of ourselves. And so he said that the purpose of life is spiritual discovery. And he said we need to return to the temple of God within our own body and get out of our mind and get high. I'm not I'm not a proponent of that sentence too much about getting high, but I think what he's referring to is get out of your mind and get into the medicine. And so religious living, according to Leary, was about this conscious here and now aliveness. He coined and popularized the catchphrase that I mentioned, turn on, tune in, and drop out. And he later explained in his autobiography that I had the privilege of working on with Tim Leary back in the 80s, 1983 or four, something like that, when I worked for the largest West Coast book publishing company, JP Charcher. The title of that autobiography was called Flashbacks, and what an amazing experience. There's so much more to Leary's words than this perceived invitation to just get high and stop being productive. That was not what he was about. And I think that the media and the Nixons out there, the anti-drug culture would mischaracterize him that way. So in Flashbacks, Leary really explained that what he meant by turn on was for us just to become this really sensitive, develop a really sensitive awareness to the levels of these levels of consciousness that each and every one of us have, and for us to just become more and more aware of, the types of triggers or the mechanisms that engage these or activate these levels of consciousness, whether it's meditation or it's music or dance or mushrooms. As Leary told us that to turn on with the sacrament is what we want, to turn on to a sacrament that returns us to our body and to our own self. And so that's really what he believed. And so tune in meant interacting harmoniously with the world around you. Tune in and be reborn. And then drop out suggests this, this active, selective, kind of graceful process of, detaching yourself from, these involuntary and unconscious programs that just run our lives and run our minds, and that come from our society, or they come from our ancestors, or they just come from religion. And so I think that this is a timeless invitation for those of us who are on a plant medicine path to, break free from those cultural things that blind us in our generation today and prevent us from, living up to our highest potential. Looking around at where our culture is headed today, especially with the medical model of big pharma and the treatment of mental illness, like how they approach or how we all approach or have approached the treatment of addiction, for example, or PTSD, or anxiety. The case can be made for a contemporary counterculture movement that takes a similar approach against big pharma. Although the goals are different than back in the 60s and the 70s, in the Vietnam War era, and that peace, love, and all that stuff. It's really a matter of rejecting what limits us, rejecting what harms us, like with these with the jabs, and like choosing to consciously live the life on our own terms. That's what it's all about. Choice. It's choosing for ourselves to use plant medicine. If we want to heal our own mental illness, we have that choice, instead of the legalized medical mafia's version of the SSRIs, the benzodiazepines, or the other addictive, big money making pharmaceutical cartel prescriptions that are our only legal choice. Now, I'm not saying that all prescription medicines are bad, so don't send me any hate messages. And but I mean, this is way out of balance. There are more people, excuse me, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people dying every year from prescription overdoses, and these are legally prescribed from their doctors, and they're dying from this. There are more people that die from that than have ever died ever in the psychedelic movement, and we're talking never in ayahuasca. And some of those reports about people jumping out of windows in with LSD and things like that. I mean, minuscule number of people that could have been or might have been killed because of something surrounding a psychedelic experience. Nothing compared to what the big pharma does every single day throughout the world with their legal medicine. So, this is really what the Psychedelic Sundays community is really about. It's creating and supporting a contemporary counterculture movement, and this is where we just all come together with a common understanding of our rights as individuals, and rejecting those things that limit us, and choosing to consciously live life on our own terms. If there's one thing that I got out of my medicine work this last year here in the Amazon, was that that I'm liberated from their programming, and I'm who I am. And you don't like it, God bless you, but I'm not going to stop being me. I'm going to be who I am. And I have the freedom to do that. Before, without the medicine work, I didn't have that liberty. And so, liberating ourselves, from that programming of be nice, uh, you know, uh, don't be angry, don't express, your truth. If it's going to ruffle feathers, you better not say it, all that kind of programming that comes from control and silencing. And this is not this is not what we're doing on the plant medicine path. We're learning how to speak our truths respectfully, lovingly, and collectively. So, a person who chooses to turn on today is someone who refuses to become, numbed by the various substances, numbed by, our technologies, and the messages that seek to make us into these mindless consumers and these compliant drones. This is especially true, in this current, political environment that we're in. This is right before, these upcoming midterm elections. And, it's like it's terrible what is happening out there. So one of the greatest, benefits that I personally received from this plant medicine path is just becoming more and more aware of, all the things that are going on in my own life that have nothing to do with this, this artificial strife that's contrived in this political system that we live in. I think it's just a shame, where these politics, where the political media is taking us. So, of all the addictions that plague our society today, our dependency on politics, I think, has become one of the worst expressions of our human spirit today. It's literally, I think it literally has driven those who are dependent on, this type of news madness, these people who are angry, and they're just their hooting has replaced this reasonable, responsible, respectful, discourse. It's just that's their preferred method of communication. And it's like social media is this, virtual crack house where, this particular kind of poison can be attained by the second. So, it's astonishing how many people get caught up in this, and it's this whole false notion that, that these things really matter. And that, and what, it's based on is like, currently being reported out of this, this very unreliable, fact-checked mainstream mass media, which I believe is pretty corrupt and bogus and owned by global elitists. So, by refusing to take my daily dread of their supplements, I'm finding that the world outside of this, political mess that this world is in right now is a much more rational place to be. And so, I'm also experiencing a lot less disappointment than my friends who have invested a majority of their faith, in a process that disingenuously promises solutions and yet never delivers and anything but more problems. So these days, a person who chooses to tune in will understand that there's more to our world than materialism and the politics, and these types of people will adjust their values to reflect this truth. As we tune in, uh, what what we own uh, is really going to become, less important than how we treat others. And so, we're the champions of individuals, seeking ways to help others without dominating them. There's a quote from Leonard E. Reed, who's is the founder of one of the free market think tanks in the United States. And he explained perfectly the individual nature of personal liberty. He said, "Man is an individual being. Man is also a social being. His material success, even his existence, depends on the progress of others. Yet man's fortune and existence depends on himself. In some respects, He's tied to others, but in most respects, he must be freed from others. The key distinction here is that others tie that our ties ought to be voluntary rather than compulsory. So by tuning into the world around us today, we can rediscover, how many truly decent people there are around us in our orbits. I've noticed and I appreciate the tremendous acts of personal service and selflessness that are taking place, especially within this plant medicine community today. I mean, and most often, these are done without any kind of recognition. I love that type of, the random acts of kindness. So the risks and the dangers of the world that we live in, they haven't disappeared. We're still on the brink of, nuclear war, like, 50 years ago, it hasn't changed. The only thing now is that the risks and the dangers are being placed in their proper perspective, which, as it turns out, is, far less, than our fear-based, media-driven culture would want us to believe. And so this is what happens when we drop out in our, in our day, in this day and age. It means to consciously break free from those aspects of our culture that, that seek to manipulate us. And with this, some of this nebulous greater good, the Green New Deal or the, climate control or all of this, all of these agendas. It's like those who seek to control us, they'd love to, ferment conflict and distrust and prejudice and, call out racism and indecency. And by deliberately limiting their influence in our lives, we become friction against their designs for their global reset. So it's simply more than rugged individualism. It's a commitment to overcoming the evils of our time with our own personal goodness, our truth, and our true grit. In our time, this is what counterculture looks like to me. Being the light amid the darkness. And so with any culture that tries to make participation in its decline mandatory, we have to resist. We have a duty to resist. And so that's what I have today. I want to thank you for spending some time with me today. And I think that's it for now. And, I always say this, and I just want to remind you that, this world is not complete without, each and every single one of you, as Timothy Leary said, showing up as your very highest versions of yourself. And so, today, let's remember to, turn on, tune in, and drop out. And so, aho, everybody.